should go up. This should start. Here it is. Hello, anyone? Give me 1 sec, just have to set some stuff up. Cool. Okay, so hello, for anyone who's here. Oh. Okay, cool. That was weird. Got some audio feedback. So I'm just picking up right where we left off last week on this weapon. We were let's see. So we left off. I think we're pretty much done with the base for this one. I have made edits since last week to this. I remember we talked about I talked about adding details on the inside of the blade around these spikes. I decided against that because it seemed unnecessary, honestly. We can just add in those details later, or they'll create themselves when we, sculpt on this. So I decided against doing that, and plus the polygons weren't really doing what I wanted, so there wasn't really an easy way to do it. What I have done, I made the blade a little bit thicker, so I gave us some more room. These spikes are a little bit larger, trying to push the stylized look, because it was a pretty thin blade with a pretty thick hilt, and that looked really odd. So that is where I decided to leave that. So what we're gonna do now, I guess beforehand I do want to explain, because I did have to do some cleanup. So right now I have models that are intersecting with other models. To make our transition over to a new program called ZBrush as seamless as possible for these sections, I always try to make sure that I have all of my models as closed objects, meaning there isn't anything open, because ZBrush really doesn't like that, and it tries to do its own thing when it fills that in, and it can give you some really messy results. So I just went through and made sure anything that was intersecting beforehand. Now, that is for ZBrush, and that is for this. If I was making this for a game, it doesn't make sense to have polygons inside of polygons, because those are just polygons that the player's not going to see, and that are just going to take up technically render time. So for a game, an optimized asset won't have those faces in there, but since right now we're just sculpting and we're not making the optimized low poly, this is the one. So we're going to take this guy, and we are going to throw him into ZBrush, or throw it into ZBrush, and start by getting this guy, adding some details onto it. So the way that I'm going to do that is, let's see, we want to do this actually. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. I'm just going to do this. So file is saved. I have a bunch of symmetry modifiers on that allow me to do certain things like reflect the blade down, so that I don't have to model twice as much geometry, which is really nice. But those when you're exporting, I always make sure, hello, I always make sure to collapse it all before I export, just so that nothing gets, you know, wonky or weird. So we're going to, and by doing that I just convert to editable poly, it goes through, turns everything into just an editable poly, and you can see that that modifier is gone. So now this is what I want to export, so we're going to do File, Export to the desktop. Actually just export it into this old guy. We want this to be sword export, I guess. Yeah, that works. Thank you for the heads up. Is that better? My mic volume is up as high as it can go. I can just start talking louder, which might help. Was that? I don't know if it's reached that quite yet. So just let me know if you notice a change. If not, then let me know and I'll keep tweaking it until we can find that balance. Okay, so I just finished that export, so we're gonna hop on over to ZBrush now, which is gonna be bloop bloop. Everything should switch over to ZBrush here in a sec. At least your views should. Ah, there it is. This is ZBrush. I've just accidentally clicked. But we want to go over to this side. Oops. Lamau. We want to import from my desktop. All right. Interesting. Control new. Ha, okay, there it is. So, there is our, there's our sword. Just as angular and low poly as it was in 3ds Max. It's my favorite part about ZBrush. So, what we're gonna do with this guy, alright, so as you can see, way different interface. I've actually swapped over to a tablet. So I am 3D modeling with a pen. Believe that or not. Up to you. So this is the default color. I normally like to use it just because it gives me a lot of like nice reflective surfaces to see. Some people prefer to change it. I just keep it on the default because, you know, I'm savage or whatever. First thing that I normally do, check up at the very top over here, we've got our active points. Those are basically our vertices. And we definitely can't do a lot of detail sculpting on this blade with only 77 points. So normally I go through, there's a lot to explain about this UI that won't make any sense. So I'm just gonna kind of walk through what I normally do, and we'll go from there. First thing I do is try to organize everything in order of how it is on the model. So that as I move down, I get closer to the bottom of the model. And it just makes things easier for me as I work through stuff. I don't know why it's doing that. Kind of double clicking there. So I I just go through really quick. I also did make sure before I exported to have everything named. So as you see here, blade spike 3 to the blade itself. It's kind of like Photoshop where they're like, oh, layers, 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 layers. Make sure everything's named. That's true. You definitely want to have things named because if you don't, it makes things really confusing. Those should be at the very bottom. Cylinder 7. And if you notice, every time I click on one, it lights up or it changes color. That's really nice because I can figure out which one I want to do first. I'm gonna do 7, it's fine. Technically, we'll do that. And then move this up. Oop, okay, cool. So for the most part, actually, we should almost be there. Boom. Cylinder 6. Rip. These are upside down. Which is fine. Oops. 6. 5. 4. 3. Cool. Okay. So that's good there. So I'm actually, before I do anything else, ZBrush loves to just, you know, dip out on you sometimes. So we're gonna save this as sword sculpt. Save. Okay. So now that we have that all donezo, I can go through. So once I get all my subtools all organized and whatnot, I hop on over to geometry. Turn this off because it's subdivide smooth modifier. So I'll show you the difference. So if you have that on and you hit divide here, it actually, you know, I would say not ruins the mesh, but ruins the mesh. It doesn't keep any of the hard angles, and it tries to like smooth it out, as it says, which is not what I want. I want it to kind of keep its shape. I just want the polygons to increase. So I normally take that off, and then I just divide and divide again. Where are we at? 1,000, 7,000. So you can see at the top my active points are starting to change. We're now at 7,000. I was at 77, I think, before. And since I have, you know, this up, those are all the polygons, all those little vertices that I'm locking onto. So it's getting there. So we'll maybe do one more, 28,000. That works. We'll delete all those. Oh. So there's what that looks like. It updated. That might be a lot. But there's this really cool thing called Dynamesh, which is super important. So as you can see right now, I'm going to take that off for a second. I have 28,000 polygons, and it's still faceted and gross. And looks really low poly. We like that if that's the style we're going for, but it's not. We want this thing looking all nice and pretty and sharp and like the concept. So what I want to do, I'm going to keep this back on. You can see how all of these polygons are built around those edges and stuff, and they're all kind of warped and whatnot. We don't like that, because when I start sculpting on them, those warped polygons are going to be sculpted how they're already warped. We don't like that. So there's a really cool thing called Dynamesh. You can change the resolution, which for the blade, I'm going to try 2048, and we're going to see that might be a lot. We're going to Dynamesh, but with oh. Alright, that's actually pretty good. That was a lot quicker than I thought. So what Dynamesh does is it takes your whole mesh, and it maps it all out, and then it evenly distributes all of the polygons at the resolution you set across your mesh. So now everything is this exact same square, and when I sculpt, I'm not sculpting on warped polygons. They're all perfect. Not perfect per se, but they're all where I want them to be. So we like this. This is awesome. So now if I take that off, I have the standard brush equipped. I have it set or whatever, but what we can do is I can just show you. So standard is now, wow, look at that. So that would not look like that if it was on something else with the other polygons. So that's perfect. So now we can go through, we can even out all these facets and kind of start getting this blade looking like it's a blade. I am going to go through though and do, how much time? We're only at 16. These guys shouldn't take that long. I'll do the blade spikes and then we'll just work on the blade for today. Those ones are easily kind of the most fun. So, blade spike. Let's see. So take smart off, divide a couple times. I mean, these probably won't need much. I'll just do 2, and then Dynamesh to 1024. Boop. Yeah, it's fine. 10,000. Like I said, we shouldn't need to do a lot on these guys, so they'll be pretty small. Just have to make sure I keep the right subdivision levels and things. Dynamesh. So if you notice, I changed the resolution. 1024 and 2048 are the two that I normally work in. If I want to do a lot of detail sculpting on something, I normally bump it up to 2048, just because it gives me a lot more control. If something's not as important, but I still kind of want some wiggle room on it, I'll do 1024. All of this, by the way, if you notice, we're now at a total of 900,000. Yeah, polygons. Or vertices. That is, we have ways of lowering that at the end, but right now we can kind of, I think the highest, to put in perspective, I have worked on a file before that was 7 million polygons, and it was totally fine. Obviously for a game engine, there's no way in heck or hell that there's no way that a game engine would be able to render a 7 million polygon object. You would never want that. But for ZBrush and the goal of kind of sculpting and getting this thing all nice and pretty, it's okay. Was I about, what did I do? I goofed. We're gonna go back because I don't remember what I did. Okay, cool. That happens, and that's why Control Z is the best. 1024, got it. Boop. Again, just looking so you guys can see that. There's a whole bunch of other reasons why. So that command is Shift F. I don't know if anyone's following or whatever, but there's a reason why I use that outside of just seeing the polygons. It changes the color, which I don't know if these are all in. Yeah, so see how that's purple? It's a different polygroup. Polygroups will come into play later, but that's just something to know, that if you want to see what polygroup it's part of, Shift F is what shows you the color. So we have the blade. We don't need any of this other stuff right now, so we are going to hide it. So now we just got this nice and crunchy blade here. So we want all these facets gone. Best way, let's see. So the blade would be steel. Just kind of brush. This is our brush menu. It's really obnoxious. A lot of stuff you can do. I always go for, I don't need that alpha right now. There are, cool thing about ZBrush, so you've got your main brush that you have equipped, and then blop. So if you see up here, main brush is my AJ polish, which is just what is on my normal thing. If I hold shift, it switches. So I can technically have, I like the idea of equipping a brush. So I technically have two brushes equipped at once, and I can just switch between them based off of what I'm doing. We are actually going to change this as well, which is if I hold control shift, I get, there's, like I said, trying to explain ZBrush UI and keyboard shortcuts is going to take a long time. But there's a lot of stuff. Controlling is for masks. Control shift gets me to this clip curve thing, which basically takes all of the polygons above a certain line and flattens it. So we're gonna save really quick because this also likes to cause the program to crash. But I can draw this line. Anything above the black is going to be smashed down into a flat line. So I'm gonna do this. Okay, and look what that did. Smashes it all down into a flat line. So that's fun. Pretty fun to use that on certain things. But that's not what we're here to do. We're here to, alright, let's see, facets we want out. So what I normally do first is try to get rid of these, these angles and stuff. So when my mouse turns blue, I'm holding shift. If you've noticed, I've got, so if, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a little minus sign that appears, and that's when I hold Alt. So everything has a default, whether it is a positive or negative, I guess, influence on the model. So AJ Polish, for instance, it'll help me, like, I can take down corners, and it's a negative. It'll indent things when I push on it, right? If I hold Alt, it pulls it out, and instead, I can pull out of the model and do stuff like that. So when I take a polish brush, I can, oops, not that one, right, polish this down, but I can polish the bends out by just holding shift, kind of move it around, whatever. But if I want the kind of indents, then I hold Alt, and it'll pull those up a little bit and allow me to kind of flatten those out. Really get some nice cool stuff. I will be swapping between brushes a lot, so just bear with me on that. Because there's a brush for a lot of things. Also, I'm trying to keep in mind how this blade was created. Because an elven smith is going to be a lot different than a dwarven smith. Not that I'm saying this looks, like an elvish or a dwarf. It looks more of an orcish blade, I guess. Which again, those types of smiths are going to be different, and they're going to handle things differently, which is really fun. So, just keeping that in mind as I go through and kind of polishing it up. There's going to, obviously I want things to look how I want them, but it's fun to keep in mind, okay, who would have made this, and orcish. Yep, I agree. So an orc smith, like I said, is going to be a lot more heavy-handed and not, I don't know. If you're forging a blade for war, I don't think you care how pretty it looks. Personally, I think that would be an orcish code. If you know any orcs or any orc blacksmiths, and I'm, oh, ZBrush likes to do this to me, and I'm speaking ill of them, please let me know, because I would love to. I'd love to sit down and talk. But if that makes sense to you guys, then it makes sense to me. So we're going to. I'm thinking the blade itself was cast, right? Cast probably looked all pretty, and then the smith went in and inset these guys, the little horns into it or whatever. So I'm willing to bet that this should look like it was all part of the same blade. So these little guys should probably have a little bit softer of an attachment here, to make, that makes sense. So this is probably one of my favorite parts about doing this kind of stuff, is just going through and really giving the blade life. Because the story gets to be told now, now that we have the shapes. And that's my favorite part about weapons. That's why I like these so much, is that a weapon can tell so much. Especially, one, by how it was created, but two, how it's handled, and how it's wielded. The kind of damage it takes, you know, is entirely dependent mostly on the user. And I think that's just really awesome, on how a blade can do that. Can look so different depending on who's wielding it, and you have an elven person make the same elven smith make the same blade type as this, right? There's things that are going to be a lot cleaner. The lines are probably going to be way sharper, versus an orc or dwarf. And it's just really cool to try to like work in those influences, because they're pretty awesome. And I like I said, I think that's really cool. So, also, if you've noticed, I'm only doing one side. Remember that symmetry thing I can do? So I can export this model and I can symmetry any of the parts that I want, and then there's the same stuff on both sides. As thinking in that route, I could do a custom sculpt on the whole thing. But if the intention of this is to go into a video game engine, how many times do you see both sides of a sword if you're wielding it? Very rarely, I think, especially if the point is away from you. So there's obviously cases and stuff, but for the most part, you don't really do that. So to just save me time, I just sculpt on one side, and then if something looks bad when it's reflected over to the other side, then also, just so you can see the difference, this is what it used to look like, and here we are now. So it's pretty cool. I love doing this so much. Like I said, one of my favorite parts is this part. Those are gonna be fun, but we can try to soften those up. Okay. So now comes my really favorite part, which is the edgeware. Where I basically just get to take this brush I have and basically just add edgeware to this. Dent, destroy, bend, crack, do all that fun stuff to all the edges. Cause, like I said, this thing made by an orc. They don't have the lightest of hands. Nor would it probably care. And as I've said before, if you know an orc smith that makes incredibly elegant and sharp and not hammered weapons, then please, I would like to sit down and talk to them. Love to see their process. Until then, I will keep the impression that orcs are heavy-handed and their blades are a little war-torn. War-torn before they even come out of the forge. Which isn't a bad thing. I think it looks dope. Just, nature of the blade. Nature of the weapon. So now we get to go and kind of give it some personality off these edges here, make it not so digital. And right now, this basically is the equivalent of kind of working with clay, is basically what this feels like. Go through and bend these edges, and as you can see, the polygons move like they're clay. And it's really cool. This is like I'm digitally sculpting. That's what this program is used for. So, which we can get some really fun stuff. So we want that. I like to, oops. I like to go through and sculpt even the parts that aren't going to be seen, because if I change something later, it's cool to see, so that it saves me work down, later end of like, if I change something or maybe something doesn't look right, so I want to move something around or change it, I don't have to worry about like, oh crap, now I have to go back and sculpt that. It's already sculpted. Plus, it's just fun because it gives me like a whole cohesive element to it, which is pretty awesome, pretty nice. Trying to figure out what the hell I want this to look like. Polish the inside here, get those out of the way. This is going to look beat to hell, because I also just, like talk to myself and whisper and stuff, so if I say something, or you guys, like Mr. Devaney over there told me, I was quiet. Just let me know, because I can't hear myself. So I'm just talking at my model at this point. So please don't be afraid to ask questions, or if you have suggestions, I guess. You think something looks cool and you want to see more of it, let me know. Ha. More questions about my process or anything like that. And I'll just keep talking about what I'm doing. So I guess stylized looks normally have they have a look, and a lot of it is like flat. Words are hard. On corners, they have kind of distinctly flat areas, but then also angled areas. So there's a lot of kind of lines and curves. Obviously, if I was making this a lot more realistic, probably wouldn't have as many of these. And that would change. Actually, it would help. I have the concept up on a different page, right next, or on a separate file right next to me. So I'm currently looking at that, just to kind of see what I'm dealing with here. So there's, now that when I finish that, kind of to an extent, we're pretty satisfied with how that looks. I don't really see anything else I need to do with this. I mean, we can accentuate this kind of flat bar if we want, polish it up a little bit. For the most part, I mean, I can just do the inside of these. Like I said, 3D modeling with a pen. Sometimes it freaks out. I am going all the way down on this one just to get a better result, because I don't want to cut myself too short, and then when I mirror it, have everything else look fine, and then have this one look super weird. So we're gonna keep that there for now. So always trying to keep things kind of like, how is this going to affect me later down the road? Is this going to cause me more issues, etc., etc. Because I have definitely done where I'm like, oh, this is going to save me so much time, and then I do it, and it actually causes me more. It saves me, it caused me more issues than it saved. And that is the nature of 3D modeling. Oops. Which is pretty cool. It's a fun way to kind of do art. I think it's unique. I like it. That, yeah, we'll have to fuck around with that. Okay, so the blade has some distinct kind of sharp cuts and stuff out of it. which is one of my favorite things to do. So we don't necessarily have to follow it exactly, but I'm realizing the way that I built the blade, we're gonna have to make some... We're gonna have to do some stuff, which is fine. Okay, so remember when I talked about the clip curve? Ha. I can just like straight up take chunks out of the blade, which is pretty dope, and I love. And then I can go in and polish that up. And what I can actually do, which is what I'm going to do here, is switch my brush. There's a Blizzard artist from Blizzard. He works primarily on Heroes of the Storm. Freaking talented super guy. He goes by Orb. And this is his Orb brushes, and he posted a bunch of his brush sets online for free. The guy's a legend. And one of them is this, which I actually want my intensity up a little bit. I literally just drag, and it creates this really dope looking slash. So on these, when I add it in, I can drag this out, and we just get some really gnarly looking cracks, just from the start. And then I clean them up, and do whatever. But it's just really cool to like, how do I want this blade to look, and how do I want it to crack, based off of what kind of damage it takes, etc., etc. So, and what I can even do here is something like this, and then with the alt, oh, too much. Try to polish it out. Sure. Yeah. And then a lot of it is just kind of playing around, figuring out what the hell I and what I don't like, and what to keep and what not. Oops. Okay, I don't like that. You're going to change that. What I want to do is actually add this back. It's fun to kind of double up on them, get them all super kind of intense. And this will be reflected on the other side too, so it'll have like a nice cool little gash. Make things real fun and interesting. Doing it for that story. Trying to figure out how I want the blade to crack along this. Concept has some cool things. I'm trying to figure out, okay, how would the blade crack, Would it crack along this? Would it just go directly, like that? Would we get something coming from here that would, like, I don't know, bork down into this? Maybe it cracks up and down? No. And this is how the sculpting process normally goes. It's literally just me trying a bunch of stuff and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. Boop, boop. Luckily, if you notice, right up here, I have all of these little squares that are all filled in black. Those are all of my undos. So as far as a program that's legendary about their undo caches, ZBrush is one of them, and I love it. It's amazing. Makes things super nice. So let's just actually. I have a lot, you know, like I said, I have a lot of brushes to work from. Normally when I'm doing stylized stuff, I predominantly just stay with Orbed because his stuff is legit. And I love his stuff. So, you know what, actually, we are going to... And if I get bored with something, or I'm like, you know what, this just isn't making sense to me right now, then I'll go kind of screw with something else for a bit, go make more. Maybe it cracked all the way through the blade. Which... oh my god. So Photoshop, you have to hold Control Alt Z if you want to. I have the setting where you have to hold Control Alt Z if you want to go back more than one. So I keep trying to do that in ZBrush, and guess what? It's not working. The curse of being a digital artist is forgetting which keyboard shortcuts apply to which program. Super fun, especially when you're doing stuff like this, because there is a lot of keyboard shortcuts, let me tell you. So now I could even do something like this, where I just, right in the middle here, bloop, get some more kind of looking damage on it. Like I said, Orc isn't really going to care about, as long as it hits stuff, and you know, an Orc is strong enough to just kind of be like, no, screw you, I'm an Orc. So, trying to make that feel natural. So actually, so then when I have something that I kind of like, I'll probably either, you know, buff this out later if I hate it or whatnot. There's a brush that's called Pinch right over it. So I can kind of go in and stylize how that cracks. You know, how it gets small and then kind of opens up big. That's really tiny. Okay, we're gonna go back a bunch. And we're gonna start on something else because I don't like this. It could just be that the angle's really weird too. Maybe I'll just fucking leave it like this. Okay. Yeah. Sure, okay. What I am gonna do though is go right here and then polish that bad boy out. I don't know, I say that a lot. That, like, this bad boy or that bad boy or whatever, I don't know, fucking weird. Can actually just straight up take a chunk out of it. That's fine. I want to actually polish into this. Make it not so sharp. Trying to get some, I don't know. Boop, 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 boop. Wow. Sometimes you know, I noodle around with this for a long time and nothing really sticks until... Although, there is something... I don't have it modeled, which I might have wanted to do, but... How does this look? Do we want a separation between the blade? It's gonna be really hard to curve it. So do we want a line there? We're gonna screw around some more with the blade for right now. Let's see if I want another small guy. I like to do these kind of smaller ones in pairs. For no other reason that they look dope. It's like a smaller one and a... That might have been too much. Especially on a blade, but... Oops. Not so close. That works. It can help me also get shapes out of the way too. Like, if I wanted to... Not that. If I just wanted to like... cut that out. Get a sharper shape on that. It helps. Just cut that off. Not terrible. Auto saves. One thing I do love though, because I'm always like, oh god, it's so close to stream. Stream goes by so fast, which is pretty awesome. I don't know. I know I'm having fun when I'm doing something art related, and I don't realize that how much time has passed. Because that's really cool for me. Okay, we're just gonna keep that right there. Well, we're gonna screw around with these guys. Bloop, bloop. Sometimes it does weird stuff like that. I don't know if you can see that. Also, if you look inside, all those polygons super screwed up. But since I still have Dynamesh on, whom! Oh look! They're all the same now. And I also just re-Dynameshed the whole mesh. So now... sorry, give me a sec. It's always weird when I do this angles. So now... all of those sculpts that I just made, everything's even. How cool is that? I love this thing. So great. The edge is kind of freaking out, but that's not a huge deal. We can clean that up. It'll get cleaned up. Shift F. So Dynamesh is awesome. Really helps make a lot of stuff really convenient. So actually, oops, come back. More slashes. Probably a smaller one. The dang heck. Probably want a smaller one on this so we can get some cool little like actual cracks going through the blade. or just some, you know, more. Ooh. Sometimes the angle at which I grab this is a little tough. I always just do that just to like start something, just because it's way easier to like use that as like a kind of a guide of how I want the edge to like wear and stuff. So, and then I can go in and I'll sculpt up the or kind of, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Or you don't, and I'm just mumbling to myself. Either or works for me. So we probably want this part to be all sorts of borked. Make it all chipped and garbage. You know, now we're getting some history, which is fun. Stop. And yeah, sometimes the mesh does weird stuff, and you have to, in order to do it, you take a lot out of the blade. But I don't know, I love having blades that aren't perfect. And so this is all off concept, by the way, because the concept is there to guide me, but it's not there to be my rules. So whatever I see fit, I kind of add in and pizzazz up, which is I love. So I can probably bend that up a little bit. Cool, cool, cool. Cool. Old blade, or new blade, did not like whatever it fought last. We can just go like, that part of the blade probably just fell right off. Right? Like, that looks like such a more interesting shape too, than just having a solid blade going across. So it's like, ah, cool, like we're already kind of building a new blade shape from the damage that we're adding to it, which is cool. That's why I love this. I have 7 minutes left, and we are not even done with the blade. These next weeks are going to be hard because all I'm going to want to do is sculpt around. But it'll be okay. We'll figure it out. So sometimes what I really like doing with these guys is like a lot of micro compositions. So I want the blade to, like, you know, break and kind of maybe crack down. And having something like that is really cool, and then also having like this kind of crack, and maybe just like, and they meet. Maybe having this blade like come down here, you know, and like meet on this, and having this kind of like wriggle back over there and also meet on this. It's just really fun to play around and kind of make these things happen. Trying to figure out like, okay, how would a blade, you know, if it took a hit like this, depending on what it's made out of, how would the force crack it? Would it crack like this? Would we get some like splits? Probably not like that though. No, would it connect before they both went over there? Would it not? Would it do some like crazy, I don't know, like, wow, something like this, you know? guess that's what I'm here to figure out. Or it does something like that, which would be dope. So when something like this happens, okay, I got 5 minutes. I normally take a slash. Oop. Stop. So I do something like that, and then let me do it with a different brush. But so this is obviously going to be kind of like, you know, it's not going to be as sharp as it could be, kind of be worn away. So I just kind of go in and like, you know, this blade is, maybe the blade was made of stone and it was like polished and whatnot, but like just damaging that crack a little bit just gives it some more wear, and now it looks more, I don't know, realistic, aggressive, stylized. Stop. If I let go too early on when I'm zooming in like that, that's what happens. Just scoots around, doesn't actually do anything. Again with the kind of pull out these guys, polish it away. Gonna damage around. Actually wasn't using my favorite brush, cracks brush. I want these details to show up, so I'm gonna go back through with this one. Try to get some more depth out of these things, because it would not be a light crack, I will tell you that. So then what I would do, what do I have? I got 2 minutes. Same thing I talked about with the pinch. And I just kind of go in, give it a little bit more of a natural kind of in and out. Crack isn't going to be the same width all the way through. It's got like a, it'll flex in, flex out, stuff like that. So going through and just kind of updating all those with that kind of gives me fun stuff. So there's part of that. I don't know if I really like that, but that was just an idea. Like I said, I've got 569 undos to go through, so I've got plenty of time to kind of get out of that. But you know, who knows? We could even just remove this chunk entirely, and I could just have like this blade that's missing a giant chunk of it. But we'll bring everything else back so you can kind of see what that would look like. I don't know. I think we got something. You know, that's just one of many parts that we'll have. So from minus those, from that, you know, to this, that's kind of the process, the way it goes, which is pretty cool. Trying to think if there's, thank you. Yeah, all it is me just kind of, literally just me screwing around, playing around, trying to figure out what feels right, what looks good. You know, there's a lot of things that sometimes they show up and they don't look good. And I get to deal with that. So it is 7 o'clock, my friends. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all of you guys showing up, saying hi. I hope you learned something or you found this interesting. Yeah, thanks for being my audience today. I will talk to you guys next week. Have a good week. Bye.